Our next speaker is the founder of We the Govern, one of the fastest growing conservative information in the state of Washington. Please give a warm welcome to Glenn Morgan.
Well, thank you for that introduction. How many are native to Washington here? You grew up in some. So you realize that's just liquid sunshine outside. Yeah. So we're all used to that. If you're not native and you moved here, welcome to Washington, and we love you. And if you're here, you're one of us. So I want to point out something that we're really experiencing here that I don't think people quite realize how significant it is. And maybe you do in this room, but I think many people in the state don't. We are really suffering from the heavy hand of hypocrites who are abusing us, knowing that the law is not going to apply to them. Knowing that everything that they do has no impact on how they live their lives. Not a single politician in Washington state who's opposing these rules, no bureaucrat and no judge is going to have their pay cut. In fact, they all had pay raises just a few months ago. Not one of them is going to lose their business. Not one of them is going to miss a meeting, anything that matters to them. They will make sure they go and do that. And just interestingly enough, there's some photos that had recently, Ari Hoffman posted them on Facebook recently, and on a couple articles of Jay Inslee, while he's doing his press conferences, his staff that are just outside a camera angle aren't wearing masks. Multiple photos of multiple staff members. So his own Department of L&I would come to your business and fine you and end your business and take away your licenses for the same kind of thing that his staff do apparently on a regular basis, and he doesn't even notice. It's just hypocrisy, and they know it. But if you listen to Inslee, he has convinced us, or he wants us to believe, that we are only 2 to 3 tax hikes away from utopia. Yeah. I'm sure that he's right. If he can just get that new tax increase, and of course it's for his environmental policy, the green movement, the green goals, and we oftentimes call it gangrene, and the government staph infection. And it has infested Washington's bureaucracy from the lowest level of government to the highest. Now that wasn't enough to get Inslee over the top. He was Mr. 1% when he was running for president. So he came back and decided to haunt our state for some period of time now. And it's been a miserable experience. But I think that the big contrast, when you look at Washington, I just did a video to look at the precinct level, how did people actually vote this last cycle? And it's pretty interesting if you look down and drill down to the individual precincts. There are little core pockets of urban, deep blue utopias, if you believe Inslee. And you can go and see it for yourself. Drive up to Olympia today, drive around beautiful Capitol Lake, and you can see the utopia that Inslee and the bureaucracy has for the rest of us. This is how they envision we should live, with those homeless camps that stretch on and on and on, filled with garbage and tents and blue tarps. And that's utopia to them, because that's how they view us. And it's absurd when you really see what's going on in Seattle. I'm telling you, there's a recent act of courage, a shocking act of courage by somebody in the media. Eric Johnson, who did Seattle's Dying, a video about a year ago, just put out his latest video called The Fight for the Soul of Seattle. How many of you have heard of that? I'm telling you, you've got to see it. It's like the greatest piece of courage, which I didn't believe existed anymore, was somebody who actually works for Como News. Where did that come from? And that video, it is a documentary that systematically dismantles the total insanity of Seattle and the dream that they have for your community and mine and where I live in rural Thurston County. That's how they think you should live. And it's insane. No rational person can see this. And amazingly, they had somebody in the media, Eric Johnson, actually produce a documentary about this, and it was hard-hitting, and it was well done, and it was just constant exposure every few minutes of one more piece of the nightmare that Seattle's building for the rest of us. And we really have to confront this, because it is not a normal vision of any modern society, and yet we see the decay happening. Now, I know when I went back east to go to college, even though I grew up in Washington, I never told anybody that I was from Kent or Newcastle or Federal Way, because they don't know where that is. And if you say you're from Washington, they just assume you're from D.C. So I always had to say I'm from Seattle, right? Shorthand. When I live here, I never want to admit I was anywhere near Seattle. But when I was back in the East, it was the only thing anybody even knew. Washington is the hinterlands of America in a lot of ways. And so I'd always say Seattle. But when you come to Seattle and you see what that is, the nightmare and the disaster that it's become, it spreads like a disease. It is something that has to be confronted and addressed. And for us to solve some of the problems that we have in Seattle, now they may be cratering that city as fast as they can, but inevitably whatever happens there does tend to spread, and we have to find ways of confronting it. Now, several of the speakers earlier said something that is very truthful and very important to remember. You're not alone. There's people just like you. I've spoken to many different groups around the state, dozens of them, the Tri-Cities, in Spokane, in Bellingham, in Thurston County, all over the state, out on the peninsula. I've done several videos of restaurants that have been staying open. I've got a laundry list now of businesses that are doing the same thing in Snohomish County, in Bellingham, all over the place, that are trying to stand up for their rights, just like you. You're not alone, but they want you to feel like you're isolated and that we're a fringe movement trying to actually support freedom. But it is not true. But they don't want you to know it, and I do believe that they're using the excuse of these lockdowns to intimidate and push back on what's going on. Now, I published, how many of you know that Inslee's created a snitch list? A snitch line, right? Turn in all the businesses, turn in your neighbors. There's nothing normal about that in our country. There's nothing more toxic than creating a system so you can turn in and harass anybody you don't like, or businesses that are competitors of yours, or somebody you just despise as you walk by. Only many of the people that called in and made these accusations didn't realize it was a public record. So I got that public record and I published it, the whole list. And but I got a call from a CNN reporter at the time, and he was furious that I published the whole list. I mean, it wasn't even about journalism. It was about his anger at me for publishing the list. How dare you publish the list? And I said, the one difference between me and you is I believe in publishing source documents so somebody can see if I'm lying. And I said, it's an act of journalism. Why don't you start practicing? Now, I was really waiting to see the hit piece that they were going to do on me afterwards. I really figured that's usually what they do. And instead, he just went silent, never wrote a thing about it. We have to stand up for what's right. We have to be willing to show up and make a difference, because inevitably, and I close every video that I do with this, I'm going to close tonight, what I'm saying tonight with this, because this is the single part that matters for all of us. The future belongs to those who show up. You have to show up to make the impact. You're showing up today. We have to show up tomorrow. We have to encourage more people to show up. We have to encourage other counties and other cities and other people to show up and not be discouraged. They want us to not be here. This is not how they want us to spend our time. So the future belongs to those who show up, and I do want to thank everybody for showing up today, and thank you for having me.